So often with eutrophication, we see unexpected consequences of eutrophication. Traditionally, what we think of happening is that we get an influx of nutrients into the system, and that stimulates the food web. In fact, that can be a good thing for different food webs, but sometimes we don't actually see those continuing through for the rest of the food web.
The primary sources tend to be sewage plants.
A lot of times people have septic tanks that they haven't maintained properly, and so they leak.
Nitrate and phosphate come from different sources, and nitrate sources include a lot of fertilizers in particular. Phosphate sources can also be fertilizer-based, but also detergent-based in terms of things that end up in the water.
There are a lot of people that put fertilizer on their yards, and also used in farming, and the runoff from those yards, golf courses, farms, agricultural facilities, nurseries, ends up in the water. Some of it goes into a storm sewer and then goes into the water. Some of it runs off directly into the water.
Sometimes when there's an influx of nutrients into the system, we get these large phytoplankton blooms, and when things like that happen, often the predators of phytoplankton can't respond fast enough, and so those phytoplankton die off, and when other organisms consume them, they create this low oxygen area, and that's what is considered a dead zone, and we see those particularly in some of the coastal areas of the United States.
When you have that much plant cover, you then don't have water passing through the column. There can be some decomposition issues with that. The extra plant decomposition becomes a biological oxygen demand question, which decreases your dissolved oxygen in the water column.
And when the algae dies off, you tend to get problems with the dissolved oxygen content in the water, which causes fish kills, puts other strains on the ecosystem.
Often when we see increased phytoplankton blooms, they tend to be these cyanobacteria, which are also the species that that produce toxins to prevent other organisms from eating them. So they represent a sort of trophic dead end where other organisms can't consume them because they can't digest that certain toxin.
You know, probably the biggest related health issue is there tend to be a large number of no swimming advisories issued during the course of the year as a result of high fecal coliform levels.
I think that just minimizing the amount of nutrients that get into the water column is useful, and so that can include everything from minimizing the use of phosphate detergents, which there's lots of alternatives available out there. Also making sure that in terms of fertilization, that it's not excess use of fertilizers tends to be a bigger problem. And using things that are more easily taken up into the plants, and so they don't tend to be excess and drop in the water column. So looking at forms of nitrogen and how easily plants can uptake them.
Maintain natural buffers around water bodies. So streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, anything like that. The more natural vegetation that you have between the water body and where you're doing any type of developed activity or applying fertilizer, the better.
Things that might reduce eutrophication of our waterways are things that would reduce the speed at which water moves into our waterways from rain events. So things like rain gardens that you can put in that will trap water, let water infiltrate, and then those nutrients that are within that water can be used to stimulate plant growth and flower growth and things that people like in their lawns.
The fancy name for it is a rain garden, but really that makes it sound fancier than it is. If you just have a little depression on your property that collects the water coming off your driveway or off your rooftop and lets it sit there for a little bit, bacteria, other natural organisms are going to naturally try to grab that nitrogen and take it out of the water and use it. Encourage other organizations that you're associated with to kind of implement responsible practices.